Welcome to the very first episode of Policy Wins, a show from Quorum about how real change happens in government affairs and what it takes behind the scenes to make it happen. I'm Patrick Kalie, and I get to be your host. Each episode, I'll talk with the people who turn strategy into real-world impact, the ones building coalitions, shaping narratives, and doing the work that oftentimes does not make the headlines, but absolutely shapes them. To kick things off, I sat down with Sean Kennedy, Executive Vice President of Public Affairs at the National Restaurants Association. Now, if you work in public affairs, you know that very few industries are more visible or more vulnerable than restaurants. They're one of the country's largest employers, operating on razor-thin margins, and they're woven into literally every single community. When COVID hit, the entire industry was on the brink. But Sean and his team helped lead one of the most significant industry-specific policy responses of the pandemic. But that's just one chapter. In this episode, we'll dig through how his team turned a technical labor policy fight, the debate over eliminating the tip credit, into a high-profile grassroots win for them in Massachusetts. Sean shared how they built trust across party lines, activated stakeholders from the ground up, and developed a program to ensure every member of Congress has a direct line to a local restaurant operator in their district. And in a lighter moment, we talk about why Sean still remembers a specific frisbee campaign from the 90s and what that taught him about cutting through the noise. It's a conversation about the mechanics of influence and what it takes to build a public affairs function that's not just responsive, but proactive and credible, and when it counts. Okay, so let's get into it. Sean Kennedy, National Restaurants Association. Welcome, Sean. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Policy Wins.
Great to be with you. Thanks, Patrick.
Of course. So public affairs often happens behind the scenes, right? So if somebody were to ask you, like if you're at a dinner party, like, hey, what do you do? What's like the short version of what you say and why public affairs matters?
I don't know that I've gotten that answer perfectly set yet, but what I try to say is that I represent and try to advance the restaurant industry with policymakers at the federal, state, and local level. But you're right. For the average person, they sort of say, so you're a lobbyist, and you try to explain that it's a lot more than that. But it's right. A profession, and it's a platform that everybody is a part of, but people really don't realize it necessarily at the time. But they know they like restaurants. They know they want policies that allow more of them, and that's where we come in.
That's great. You have an incredible ability to work with folks on both sides of the aisle. Like you've done some great things with Democratic administrations pushing some really big piece of legislation forward and some huge policy impacts there, but also some great relationships with Republicans, and even continue to nurture that over time, which is something that I think a lot of folks are kind of struggling with. Can you share a little bit about your approach to becoming a trusted, valuable partner across policy lines?
Well, I've been in this town longer than I care to admit, but I've been involved in work here on Capitol Hill or in the DC area for almost 30 years now. So it starts off with just I'm known to both sides, and I've worked closely with both parties. But let's make this a bit more about the National Restaurant Association. If we do our job right, our issues and our priorities should not only be bipartisan, but they should be nonpartisan. What is great about this industry is when we walk into an office, the staff assistant, the legislative aide, the chief of staff, everybody has used your product, our product, at least once, probably over the last day, but certainly over the last few days. And they understand it. So I'm not a trade association that's representing cryptocurrency or nanotechnology where you have to explain to folks for a second, this is how blockchain works. This is what nanotechnology means. People understand the product, and the fact that if you can work off of that foundation, they start nodding their heads quickly and saying, I like restaurants. I'm hoping that there's a new one that opens. I'm hoping for a Thai restaurant to open in my neighborhood soon. What are the things that you recommend, Sean, that we be thinking about so that we can encourage more development and more creation in our districts? If you can crack that nut, if you can sort of solve that problem, you can really transcend political partisanship and try to make this a nonpartisan issue.
That's great, being able to connect it to something they know. I wonder how many legislators have worked at a restaurant at some point in their lives. I bet
Well,
it's a
the
lot.
national average is over. I mean, over half of Americans have worked in the restaurants at some
Hmm.
point in time. We're still trying to figure that out for members of Congress, but it's funny you say that. I mean, in Massachusetts, there was a major floor fight, a major ballot initiative that would have really hurt the restaurant industry, and Governor Healy opposed it
Hmm.
because of her work as a server. She knew what it meant. She also heard from a lot of Massachusetts restaurant operators, but she also formed her opinions on that important issue based on her life
Hmm.
experience and what she got out of being a tip server in Massachusetts.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk about that. Can you talk a little bit? That was around the tip credit,
Yes.
right? Can you talk to me a little bit more about like what your team was doing around the tip credit and how you've ended up getting a lot of great policy wins on that issue?
So the tip credit's one of these issues that is so can be a little difficult to explain. It's much easier to say why it's a bad idea, or
Hmm.
it's much easier for someone to say why we shouldn't have it than it is to explain to folks and say why we should.
Hmm.
But the tip credit basically is a compensation model that ensures that every server, every tip server, comes home with at least the minimum wage, and hopefully a lot more based on tips. But there are some that have said we should eliminate it and we should have the employer pay a lot more of that tipped server's wage. The more that you increase labor costs on restaurants, which is we are an incredibly labor intensive business, but we're also an incredibly barely profitable business. So
Hmm.
the more you increase labor costs, the more chance there's going to be of layoffs, of reduced workforce, and of less investment in restaurants. So what we had in Massachusetts was a ballot initiative where Massachusetts voters were asked the question, should the tip credit be eliminated? And it would have, we had economic data, anecdotal data that explained why be bad for restaurants and why be bad for servers. I mentioned that the governor announced that she was against it. But what we really focused on, Patrick, was not, it wasn't lobbying per se. It wasn't hearing from me or the great folks
Hmm.
at the Massachusetts Restaurant Association. It's how do you activate and engage servers in Massachusetts and restaurant owners? And if every segment of the restaurant industry is coming forth at public forums and public meetings and saying, getting rid of the tip credit is a lose, lose, lose
Hmm.
for the server, for the restaurant owner, or for the customer, it really has an impact. And for a state that is fairly progressive like Massachusetts, it was defeated 64 to 36%. So a big win
Hmm.
for restaurant servers and restaurant owners in Massachusetts, but it was because we had a unified message. We worked very well, and we were able to really break down what the negatives were in a very meaningful way to the public.
Right. I want to really drill down into the grass tops program, right? Or
Yeah.
the how you were able to activate uh, all these folks who work in restaurants, who own restaurants. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that grass tops advocacy, how it came into being? And you mentioned a few of the wins that you've gotten from it, but how has it evolved over time?
Well, I think number one is, you need to be you need to be engaging from a platform that is trusted and is authoritative. And during the pandemic, you had a lot of restaurant operators who were completely shut down, and chefs were sitting at home, really worrying about how they were going to pay their lease for that month with a restaurant that was shut down by government. During that time, the National Restaurant Association really stepped up to do more on engaging folks, explaining through video updates and updates on YouTube and Instagram what is the economic impact right now and
Mm.
what's our policy agenda to try to provide relief for struggling restaurant owners. We gained a lot of credibility with that, both servers whose jobs were dependent on the restaurant industry and restaurant owners who needed policies to make sure that they could continue to keep their doors open. Once you have that trust, once you have that credibility, the question is just what's the right way to go from there? And how do you use that authenticity to get folks to engage in public policy challenges at the right time in the right way. So when we look at something like the tip credit, if you're a tipped, if you're in a tip credit state, and if you are a tipped restaurant or restaurant that has tipped servers, you're relying on that model in order to have enough servers to take care of your customers and to ensure a great experience. And eliminating the tip credit is going to inevitably change that. What we really try to do is first come out with we're very fact and data driven. So we have a great research department. We'll do surveys of the industry. We'll combine that with what our own economists are predicting. We put that data out. Then you look for public policy solutions that will help improve the what the data is pointing at. So if the data is pointing at the negative impact of the tip credit, well, let's turn that into a policy agenda. Let's turn that into an advocacy play in a state like Massachusetts. And then the last part, of course, is who is going to be the face of that. There's lobbyists have certainly lobbyists and consultants certainly have an important role to play in this. But at the end of the day, what a member of Congress or a county councilman or a city council rep wants to see, they want to see that server they want to see that owner that's signing a lot of paychecks every 2 weeks. They want to see that server that's able to put themselves through college or through graduate school or support their family based on that tip server job. And if you can bring together the right messaging with the right messengers on the right policy, and do so in an honest and authoritative way, you can eke out some really significant wins like we've seen in 2024 and 2025.
That's great. That's great. If you don't mind me asking, how do you operationalize such a program? Like do you assign people to members, or what does that look like?
So we have a few programs. There's sort of two ways to go about it. Number one, we have a grassroots database, an email list, if you will. And look, everybody gets a lot of emails right now, so you have to choose the right cadence for how to engage people. But I'll create on my laptop, just like this, a 90-second update. And it's almost like a headline news segment of these are the major issues. This is where things are on no taxes on tips. This is where things are on the 199A small business deductions. And I'll do it in 90 seconds. It's got a shelf life probably of 3 or 4 days before it becomes old news. Right. But you do it at the right amount of depth and the right cadence where people say, yeah, I'll watch the National Restaurant Association for 90 seconds. And then when a big fight comes and we say, we need you to stop, take 2 more minutes, fill out this survey, or click this link to engage your member of Congress, we can do that. So that's one platform. That's just pure grassroots. The other activation that we have is something called the Hill Runner program. And Hill Runner is aimed at establishing one restaurant in every congressional district in the United States where that's the go-to person. That is the person where if a member of Congress wants to really get the skinny on what a drive-through ban would mean for a community, or how a child care tax credit could really make it easier for an employee to work in the restaurant industry. We want to make sure that voice is there. So it's a program we started a few years ago. We are continuing. We're selective, but it's really exciting because these are men and women and restaurant owners. They get unique training from us. They get unique political opportunities to engage with their members of Congress. And they can really develop that relationship so that when a member of Congress is looking at an issue and they say, I wonder how this affects my restaurant, they say, I know just who to call.
Right. That's fantastic. So it's assigning a member of your organization or advocacy base to a member of Congress. That's fantastic. So they have one point of contact to go to for each of these different stories.
Exactly.
So it sounds like your team's doing all of that, right? From like the high level, here's the research, down to the messaging, down to like, how do we get like those individualized stories? Well,
you can outsource some of them. The answer is yes. Yes, we are. We have a policy group. We have a communications group. We have a great advocacy group. We have a grassroots group. You can outsource those functions, obviously, Patrick, and there are a lot of platforms that will allow to supplement it. The restaurant industry is the nation's second largest employer. So the stakes are high. And when you have such low profit margins, it means that decisions made in the U.S. Capitol here in Washington or in state houses around the country have an immediate impact on the bottom line of a restaurant. Most restaurants, they have about 14 to 16 days of cash on hand. So tax decisions really matter, and tariffs really matter, and workforce issues really matter. And when you put all that together, you need a trade association that is making those investments to make sure that we can provide that support and that engagement on grassroots, on communications, on policy, and on research. I'm not saying we're still struggling. We're still not struggling. We're still fighting to improve and better serve folks every day. But it's a lot. We're always very busy. But guess what? So are restaurant owners.
I was about to say that if anybody here's seen The Bear,
Exactly.
Exactly. It's one of those shows where every time I watch it, I'm like, oh man, I'm so excited to go back to my job and Salesforce and Canva and all those
it is
stuff.
tough. And what's interesting about this industry is nobody starts a restaurant expecting they're going to be a millionaire. I mean, the old joke is the best way to make $1 million in the restaurant industry is to start with $2 million. But they do it because they're passionate. They're either passionate about service, or they're passionate about their community, or they're passionate about a cuisine that they think is going to change the world. It is such a entrepreneurial and creative mindset, and to represent them in Washington and in state houses, people respect that. This is not this isn't it's not the tech industry. It's not the sand and gravel industry. It's not the pharmaceutical industry. It's one that really resonates with people because they know it's hard work. They know there's an incredible amount of risk. They know that restaurants can very easily shut down in times of economic uncertainty. But they also know that they're serving a product that the community relies on.
Right.
That they're a cornerstone of that community, and they want to make sure there are as many of them as possible.
Totally. I could use a few more where I'm at.
We all could.
Yeah,
we all could. I think what's fun is when you are, and one of the things that I love about this industry is in your hometown, if you see, the brown construction paper going up behind a pane of glass, you're going to go up and you're going to read what the building license is.
Yeah.
And you're going to, I'm sure you'd be thrilled if it was a barber shop, but you'd be a lot more excited if it's a Thai or a Mexican or a Chinese restaurant. And that's what people get. And that's really where you begin crystallizing public perception with public policy.
Right. I don't know if you somehow did homework on me to figure out that I love Thai food, because you keep.
I've done it
if
twice.
It's a Thai restaurant, it's like, that's it.
Our
That's what I'm looking
team
for.
is very good, but they did not tell me that one.
Okay.
But I'm glad you've got a favorite cuisine. It's my wife's too.
Oh, it's fantastic. Fantastic. Every time of the year. So I would love to talk about a little bit more. You've been in the game for a while now, and you mentioned how things shifted around COVID. And I'm curious, what are some of the big shifts that you've seen in the advocacy space? Going from fax machines to emails and, what are the biggest changes in your view? And, or is there anything that's hasn't changed that you would love to
know? It's a great question. When I started on Capitol Hill in the 90s, and postcards were the big means of contacting the Hills before the internet. And then we would get, so you had letters, you had postcards, and the postcards all had the same message, right? It was a pre-written message that just had someone's name, address, and sticker, and they had to dig up a stamp and put it down there. We would obviously get letters and we get phone calls. We did our town halls. But there were fewer channels by which people could engage and express their views of a member of Congress. You didn't have Instagram. You didn't have any of the online platforms. And then from a broadcast media perspective, you had cable TV, but most people were still getting their news from the three primary, terrestrial broadcast networks. But I remember people would try to do creative ways to engage Capitol Hill. So I remember Hooters, the restaurant bar concept, gave people stickers, and the stickers were just like a postcard. And it was, I think it was a tax issue or a labor issue or something like that. And then they put the sticker onto a frisbee, and they sent us the frisbee. So my office every day in the house, and it was a small office that I worked in, we would get 60 orange frisbees a day. And first it's sort of cute, and you're giving them to your interns and to the UPS delivery guy. And then by the end of the month, you're like, please, can we solve this problem? Because my kids are tired of me saying, go in the backyard and play with that frisbee.
Right.
And I have some new ones.
Yeah.
But it's what's changed is it is so much easier. When I told you the postcard, the hardest thing for the postcard was finding the stamp.
Hmm.
In the new era, you can do it. You can engage a member of Congress from your car, from a bus, walking to a restaurant, where you can hit click. You can type out a quick message and hit send. You can record a video testimonial and send that to a member of Congress, or post it on your social page, tagging a member of Congress, and it can really be overwhelming. What do you do? And look, I've worked in industries where people will say, I've had third parties that come up to me and say, we'll generate 100,000 emails to the senator of your choice on the issue of your choice. And you ask yourself, well, is there someone on the other side of the issue that's doing the same thing? And if you have a member of Congress who's now received 200,000 equally divided emails and web postings on an issue, how do they process that?
Hmm.
And so what's changed is the number of ways and the ease and convenience by which people can engage their member of Congress. What hasn't changed is the degrees by which people can do it authentically. It is very easy to find a stamp and to send a postcard. It is another thing to show up at a public hearing wearing a T-shirt that says "Protect Massachusetts Restaurants," and when it's another thing or to go to a town hall, or to pick up the phone and call a member of Congress. So I feel that policymakers listen and pay attention a little more to how much effort's going into someone who chooses to engage them and share their views. Emails still matter. We still use them. We still rely on it. We don't do faxgrams. We haven't done frisbees yet, but we do an across the board. But going back to that hill runner I was speaking of, the more that you can make it personal, the more that you can cut through the noise of 200,000 emails and more. You know what? Here's a restaurant owner that knows exactly that the member of Congress is probably going to order the crab cakes when they come in, and they're always going to be in on a Friday night after when the House is adjourned for the week. And when that member of Congress calls them and says, "Hey, I know it's late. Can I get a table in the back corner for me and my spouse to enjoy a quick night out?" We are an industry that knows policymakers pretty well, because we're serving them as well as everyone else in the community. So it's, how do we try to personalize that and do more to leverage those relationships? But what's always stayed the same is it's the authenticity and the personalization of that engagement.
Right. I'm thinking there's probably people who work in the plastics industry right now that are listening to this and going like, bring back the frisbees, like do the frisbees again.
I actually do think in my memento box from my tenure in the House with Congressman Dick Gephardt, I do think I kept one of the frisbees, because it was just such almost a traumatic part of my life every day, Patrick. My God. I don't even, but the sad part is I don't remember what the issue was. I remember I don't like orange frisbees, and I remember I remember the company. I don't remember what the issue was.
Yeah. So you mentioned a bit about like now it's way easier to participate, right, than it's ever been before. What are some other things that you think are giving some hope and optimism in the advocacy space as it goes to, getting folks in front of policymakers to shape that policy?
I think that what happened in Washington used to be pretty secretive isn't the right word, but it wasn't understood. It wasn't appreciated. You had C-SPAN, but you didn't have political commentators like you do now. I mean, there are people who understand tax legislation remarkably well, just from their home in Omaha, just from their home in San Francisco. And they're doing it because so much more of what the government's doing is now posted online. They can read the text of an amendment and engage. They can read the text of a bill and engage. They can watch a hearing and listen and learn. And it used to be you needed to have a lobbyist or a one-way or a hotel room and a line stander to sit in on a meeting on Capitol Hill. Technology has really raised the bar in a good way on accountability of elected officials to the people who are voting them in and out of office every day. And members of Congress get that. They know that every hearing is being live streamed. They know that if not C-SPAN, 45 cable channels are monitoring what's happening on the House floor or the Senate chamber at any given time. And so it means that they are much more apt to say, I need to be thoughtful about how I cast this vote, because there are a lot of people at home who are watching it. And then when they hopefully what they'll say, Patrick, is, who do I need to be thinking about? So if it's a bill that affects labor policy and we're the nation's second largest private sector employer, part of my job and my team, our association's job, is to make sure they're thinking, has anyone checked in with the National Restaurant Association? Has anyone checked in with our Hill Runner? Because this is a labor policy bill that probably was going to have an impact on them. So to me, your question asked if there was a more optimism. I am more optimistic because of that greater awareness, both on the voter side and the community leader side, and with that member of Congress, that there's a lot more opportunity for tracking, for conversation, and for engagement.
Right. As you're speaking, I keep thinking about all these major moments in the history of the past, how many, like 10 years or so, and every one, restaurants is like majorly impacted, right? And so I'm curious, is there been, you've been doing this for a while now. Was there like one big challenge that you didn't see coming, or that like really like sticks in your brain as like, man, we overcame that, and or like, what was that one big challenge that?
It's hard not to say COVID. It's hard not to say
Right.
the pandemic or something like that. And what was interesting, Patrick, was we sort of saw the wave coming. It was in March, and we noticed that St. Patrick's Day turnout was really low. And then we noticed that advanced bookings suddenly were being canceled. People were, and certainly large parties were being canceled. And so we were sort of, is this going to be okay? But we went through, and then suddenly indoor dining shuts down. And when indoor dining shut down, we are the most restaurants, as I said, 14 to 16 days cash on hand. Restaurants have no safety valve. There were no cash bank accounts that they could sit on. They still had rent payments. They still had leases. They still had energy costs, even just to keep the freezer cold, to keep the freezer operating. Every industry in America immediately hired a lobbyist and went to Washington and said, we need a relief package. And I remember being at a meeting, and it was all virtual at that point because the Congress wasn't physically convening. But the Athletic Footwear Association, so Adidas and Nike, they had hired lobbyists to say, we need federal support because people are going to gyms are shut down, spas are shut down, people are going to be working out less, so they'll be buying fewer shoes, and that's going to have an impact on the industry within the United States that is supported by the footwear industry, footwear sector. And I remember thinking, wait, like we can't even feed. There are people who rely on restaurants to feed their kids that they don't have the wherewithal to make 21 meals a week. So Congress was suddenly faced with every association knocking on their door, on their virtual Zoom room door, saying we need an industry specific recovery package. And the only two industries that secured that support at the end were restaurants and the airline industry. Very different sides of a similar coin. And it's interesting to me, if you give me 30 more seconds, what I thought was interesting on this one was, you think about airlines and a city like, let's take Boston. If JetBlue had to shut down because the skies were closed by government demand, if JetBlue shut down, that would have a macroeconomic impact on Boston, where they're hubbed. I don't think that people would be upset. No one would say, oh my gosh, I loved JetBlue so much It's a great airline. I don't think people would say, this is, I remember my first flight on JetBlue,
Right,
but
right.
it was going to have an outsized economic impact on tourism and business travel. Versus a restaurant. If one
Yeah.
restaurant shut down in Boston because of the pandemic, it's not going to have a huge economic impact. The world's not going to end because of one restaurant failing. But the cultural impact, people will
Right.
shed tears.
Yeah.
People will say, I met my significant other, my girlfriend, my boyfriend, when my parents, celebrated their 50th anniversary, we surprised them at this restaurant. I celebrated my kids' graduation at this restaurant. And the JetBlue is one company with an outsized economic impact. The restaurant industry is hundreds or thousands of small businesses that together can create an outsized economic impact, but also can just inspire and move someone emotionally.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that Congress gave support to the airline industry, because that's the physical internet of this country. I'm
Right.
also not surprised that they gave, and we're appreciative of the fact that they gave support for the restaurant industry, because we are what brings people together within every community.
Right, right. It's a really good point. I can think of specific restaurants that have closed that I did shed a tear. So,
Right?
like, I'll never get a
It's
cutlet like
amazing.
that
And
ever
it
again.
didn't matter. And it didn't,
Right.
and there were some that have been around for 70 years,
Yeah.
and they had withstood social unrest, economic unrest, wars, everything in between.
Right.
But a government mandated shutdown, there's a point where it's just, it economically, it financially isn't possible. And
Right.
it really does break your heart.
Right. So if you could leave our listeners, whether they're like experts in public affairs, rookies, interns, like that, with one career lesson, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. Look, I think that it's number one is just to always be talking, and more importantly, always be listening. But it's engaging with people here in Washington, D.C. I spend a lot of time seeing how other people do things. I mean, I learned how to do my 90-second updates because I used to work in the airline industry, and I would see the Facebook posts of the head of the flight attendants union, and she would hold her cell phone to her face while walking up Capitol Hill and explaining what she was going to do for the day. And she is an incredibly dynamic leader and speaker, and that she had developed a huge following based on that. And it was flight attendants who wanted to learn what's going on. Well, let's see what her update is. So I cribbed. I was inspired to do something similar. But it's also just to make sure that you are keeping abreast of what the trends are, how to use. I mean, technology platforms can be such an incredible solution to help you optimize, distill your message into something that's easily digestible, that's easily accessible. And that if you do it right, and if you can convey that authenticity and that energy, will hopefully inspire people to engage and to advance your agenda.
No doubt. No doubt. Love that. Well, thank you so much, Sean. It was a pleasure having you on. A lot of great nuggets in this one. And it's just been a pleasure talking with you.
Let's keep in touch about Thai restaurants otherwise. Thanks for having me.